everyone, and welcome back to the Better Media podcast. Today, I'm incredibly excited to have one of my favorite people on here, Vanessa McPhill. Vanessa is absolutely a digital marketing expert in the space. Vanessa, I think we've worked together for around 3 years now, right?
Maybe even 4. Is it 3?
Maybe four. Honestly, it's been forever. We originally got connected through Garden of Life, where Vanessa was an absolute badass. I think, like, put simplest, I would show up at QBRs. I'd be really intimidated because the person asking the right questions at every QBR was you. I think you brought a lot of expertise to Garden of Life and the stage of business they are in that I'm really excited to talk about today. Because for those who aren't aware, Garden of Life recently got acquired by Nestle, and Vanessa is still leading a lot of those initiatives throughout Nestle now. So, one, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And what
Two,
an intro.
yeah.
Wow.
One question. What has been the craziest change that you've seen in the space in the last 4 years of us working together?
I don't know if it's the last 4 years and maybe more accelerating the last couple. I think the thing that's changed is that the playing field is so leveled, right? Like, I think when I first got into the industry, we won't say numbers because I'm way older than you, but when I first got into the industry, you had to be big brand, you had to have big budgets, and you had to really understand media. My expertise is in media. And so it had to be, we were Mad Men. It was TV and it was Facebook and it was spend this amount of dollars at ROI. And now you can launch a brand just by being a person that people think is cool and people want to see win. And you can be really scrappy and create great connections without spending a lot of money. So I think, especially now, especially post pandemic, especially with people and consumers, really strapped for cash, I think that's the biggest thing there is the playing field is a lot more even. And so being big CPG, while it has a lot of benefits, is not all that you need to do in order to be a successful brand.
100%. I think the one competitive advantage that we typically saw with big CPG was financing that build the creative teams that could build commercial grade creatives. But the secondary aspect was they could target a really broad audience, which was needed when you're doing national media buys. Nowadays, we see you have Amazon or Meta or TikTok, which allows you to run a lot leaner from a budget perspective, or you don't even need a good budget if you have a great creative and great UGC.
Yeah, if you really understand your audience and understand what makes them tick and what they really care about, right? I think it's so interesting for me. I've always said, like, I am a super consumer. And I think that's how I ended up in this industry. I just like went through the
Does this
list and
mean
was
you
like, I
spend a
don't
lot of money? You like to spend money? Because that's my problem.
yeah, I'm spending, but I'm the kind of person. I remember when I decided to go into advertising, I saw an ad. It was a toothpaste ad, and it was like these beautiful bubbles around whatever, and I was like, that seems like fun, and went out and bought that toothpaste the same day, and I was like, maybe I should just do this for a living. But now that ad is just a TikTok, and you don't need to spend a bunch of money there, and you don't need to have, an MBA candidate or a master's in fine arts to come make your creative. You can just really create connections with people. And so I think that has become such an interesting switch in what the industry is seeing right now.
The part I want to reiterate there is the creating connections. Again, if we go back 6 or 7 or 10 or 15 years, when you're creating a commercial that's going to be played on a TV network, you're having to create a commercial that speaks to everyone, every demographic, every income range, right? And now we have the ability to get really, really niche with who we're targeting. And the creating connections is the core part, is we can now create a custom graphic that relates to the core audience we're targeting. And when we got started together at Garden of Life, I think that's a lot of what made you all successful is you're really fantastic identifying these core audiences that you should go after. And then you took the time and I mean, money, it takes money to create these assets. But the time and the investment you all made to connect paid off because you had a really loyal audience that honestly sold the products for you because they loved it so much. They would go out and they'd create more content and they would speak to the world about how good you guys were.
Absolutely. I think Garden of Life is a great example of a company that just has such a strong connection with consumers, right? They absolutely love us and they hold us to a high standard. And so I think, coming from media, they always say you have to understand your brand, but you also have to understand your consumer. I think the other part to Garden of Life is that the consumer understands us, right? So they know what we stand for. They understand when we put a new product out into the market, what are we bringing to the table? They already understand what we're going through on the back end. And so again, that creates those advocates for us and it makes it a lot more effective. When we would start to do more TV and, some of those mass awareness channels that we started to have a little bit more funds for, one of the things that we sat with our agents and we talked about was awareness. right? So obviously we want to get reach, we want to get target, we want to get awareness, but we sat back and we said, reach isn't the key number here, it's targeted reach, right? Because I don't necessarily need my ad to go in front of every single person who's watching Hallmark Channel, because not every single person who's watching Hallmark Channel cares if their vitamins are organic, right? And so we really started to sit with our agencies and talk about what is the targeted reach number that we want to get to, right? How are we spending our dollars? And maybe it's a little bit more expensive, or maybe it isn't, depending on the channel. But who is the consumer we want to put this in front of? And then also, what is the message we want to give to them? Because not everything is going to resonate with every person.
That is a fantastic call out. We talk to so many brands who still view awareness, what I would say is like traditional brand marketing awareness budget, but you came from the background where you actually understood digital marketing. You also had worked enterprise historically, so you knew that there were levers that could be pulled that allowed you to do both. And I think something that you've done really well is you held your agency partners accountable to that. You didn't allow someone to come in and say, hey, let's just spend on this awareness initiative and just go solely for reach. You said, how can we target that down, which is going to take a lot more work. But that additional targeting is going to drive so much more incrementality and pay off in the long run with every other initiative you ran after that awareness campaign.
Absolutely. And we saw that every single time, when we would go out there. Sometimes, maybe our CPMs are a little higher sometimes, but what we saw was our return was significantly higher. Our brand metrics, where we're looking at awareness, when we're looking at favorability, when we're looking at consideration, those increased as well across the board. And so we saw impact across all of the channels that we did. And it made it just more effective, right? So one thing that we did early on, when I first started with Garden of Life, is we started to look at our metrics a little differently. And so, I think we talked about this a couple of times, is you look at your awareness metrics and it's like, I want to get more reach. And then you look at your performance metrics and it's ROAS. And that's great. But it's kind of blending together now. And so we sat down with our leadership and we were like, okay, what are our objectives here? At the end of the day, what are you trying to accomplish? And obviously it's going to be sales. Like at the end of the day, it's a business. You want to, exactly, sales. But if you're digging more into that, it's like, okay, I want to drive sales, but long term, I also need to increase brand awareness. I want to increase household penetration, those type of things. And so we literally broke down into a scorecard what channels are going to drive what metrics, right? So if I'm putting a TV campaign out there, I'm not going to come back to report to my CEO that it was a strong ROI, because there it wasn't. Like that's not what we're going to do. And they're going to say, cut all that and put it into search. And search is great and search has its reads, but like I myself, am not a search expert. Search makes my head hurt, right? It's like get people like you guys to do search and do some of that performance metrics, but getting our leadership to understand you can't but judge those in the same way, right? And making every channel do what it does and do it effectively. How can we measure that effectiveness within each channel? So scorecarding our success has really helped us. And, we've had to finesse some numbers. He was a CPA, so always, how can we get these numbers? And we figured out like regression modeling and all this to say, all right, well, if you have this kind of reach or this kind of engagement on social, if we put all those things together and just do an index, we have an A+ on this campaign. So that has helped us a lot.
Out of curiosity, that can be a really big jump for brands to make. Did you just flip a switch and say, hey, here's our scorecard, here's the metrics within the scorecard that matter most? Or how much of those were like added incrementally over time?
It was absolutely the latter. It was absolutely added incrementally. And I would say over the course of a year, so we did look at our campaign reporting, and obviously he was looking at consumption, he was looking at data, right? And so I would go in and be like, oh, let's say Pandora, for example, we'd say, we've got this kind of reach on Pandora and we've got this kind of click-through rate. And he's like, okay, but the sales are the same. And I'm like, well, of course, it takes time and we have to get people to understand. And so at that point maybe the sales aren't jumping here, but here we can look at search and we have during these weeks that we have Pandora up, we see a little bit of uptake in searches for this particular product that we're promoting. And so we started to just make connections between metrics and not necessarily say, this is driving sales, but no, it's not driving sales yet. Obviously, it's going to take time. There's, consumers have to get to know you. They have to get to trust you. But here are some other metrics we can look at to show there is an impact. And eventually that impact is going to lead into sales.
One thing I think that our partnership has really done well is the test and learn mentality. I think we joke about it all the time. It's kind of like we've spoken about it in multiple different arenas. And The reason we love that is because you all were first to market with a lot of initiatives that gave you a large competitive advantage, especially in the beginning. How do you balance what you just mentioned, which is some things take an extended time frame, right? Especially as we look at this omni-channel world where consumers are on multiple different platforms. How do you balance an appropriate time frame for testing while also being really quick to move on to new initiatives if something's not working?
That is a really great question. I think it's a matter, it's one going to depend on who your leadership is, right? So probably more, where there are more cooks in the kitchen, when you have more finance people in there, it's a lot harder.
A
You know,
lot
if
more
you're not,
approvals are needed.
a lot more approvals and a lot more people saying we can't spend this money. But I think a big part of it is establishing upfront what your KPIs are going to
Yeah.
be and expectations, managing those, right? So, there's your optimization KPIs and the things that you're looking at on a weekly basis, and maybe those look great and maybe they don't. And then there is your more impactful long term, like your MMM, that maybe you'll look at quarterly or maybe you'll look at every year. So it's really establishing what your KPIs are per tactic and how frequently you're going to look at those, and really just kind of hand holding your way through those things. Right. And so, certain channels, like some of those higher awareness channels, you're not going to see return immediately and you don't expect to. And so, but you are looking to see, all right, are we delivering our reach numbers? Is our CPM looking good? Are we seeing more chatter on social? Those type of things that we can monitor. And you get to see those positive implications. Um, Versus a channel like, let's say, search, or we're looking at DSP, or we're looking at things like that, you can move a lot more quickly and you can pivot a lot faster. Eventually, we got to a point where we actually would hold funds for testing and learning, right? So, there are things that there are table stakes that we know we're going to do because we know they work. And we know that maybe the metrics won't come back right away, but we know at the end of the day, they're going to drive sales online, they're going to drive sales in store, including stores outside of selling. But we can look at other metrics to say this is working across the board. So we would hold back funds for testing, and we would say, all right, here's our kind of like, we're talking about the hierarchy of needs. We're going to get that bottom of the funnel, or the bottom of the foundation, set properly, and then test other things to see, all right, maybe it's a 10K test here. And obviously, everyone's budget is different. So 10K might be a lot to somebody, but it might not. And so we'll put those funds apart and say, let's test it. Or even within a tactic, let's test a different creative. And so we just saw that, yes, there were things that failed, but we saw a lot more successes than failures when we were willing to do that.
Something I think you all have done really well, knowing as many team members that I do, is stay educated. And one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning is it really depends on your leadership is, what are your leadership strengths and weaknesses and how do you educate them on whether or not a test and learn is going to be beneficial. And I think what you all have done well is you learn the platform or the initiative you're pushing through and you break it down in a way that makes your leadership able to understand. And you set expectations really well of, hey, this may not drive the return we're looking for, but it's also going to cross off X, Y, and Z, and we can reiterate on it later. And I just want to give a huge shout out to your team for that because a lot of people aren't able to keep up. It's really complex in this industry to keep up with all the changes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And thank you for that. And I think what I think even goes even further than that is that we put a lot of emphasis on making sure that our relationships, yes, consumer relationships are important, but our relationships with our agencies was crucial to us. And so we always wanted everyone at the table with us. We wanted everyone to feel as an extension of our brand. And so what I've learned over the last few years working with you guys and our other partners, is when you treat people like human beings, and we're talking about consumers, but we're also talking about just the people who work with us, right? Everyone wanted the business to be successful. And, that took the guard down a little bit and allowed more education to come in. And so one of the reason why we were able to go back and say to our leadership, like, we understand the platform and we understand this and that, is because you guys were really, really forthcoming with helping us understand. Like, in the beginning of this conversation, you said that my questions were intimidating. And I find that hilarious because I found you intimidating, because I was like, man, this girl knows her stuff. I have no idea. And I would ask a question, and it would, a lot of the times, me being more brand focused or media focused, my question was, way up here,
Yeah.
and you had the details. And so the relationship that we all had helped me, even that out a little bit, so I can go back to my leadership and say, this is why it's going to drive incremental revenue. So
There was so much trust, and I think you have to almost meet people in person to establish that trust. And I think that trust is what drove a lot of our candid conversations. And I call out candor because again, that's something I think everyone on your team has done incredibly well. I mean, starting from Gabby to everyone else, there's a lot of transparency and candor if things are not going well, but also being willing to stop and say, hey, that doesn't make sense. Break it down in a way I can understand, which is what allowed us to all speak the same language. I think we are all able to set aside ego and have a conversation. Like you said, we all cared so much about driving the brand forward. And I think that was a key difference in the beginning.
Absolutely. We treat each other like human beings. And I think that even shows in from a consumer perspective, right? There are so many brands out there, and again, super consumer release of content, where you go through the comments and it can be just a random person from Pennsylvania who wants to launch a brand. And people see that person putting in hard work and they see what they stand for and they want them to win. And so for us in our relationship, it was everyone wanted Garden of Life to win. We believed in the products, we believe in the company, and we also believe that we're safe to explore and to give feedback and recommendations. And no one felt like, oh, they're we're against each other and things like that. It was all, how can we make this work and how can we make this better and how can we iterate? So that really, I think, drove our relationship and our business forward for sure.
Knowing that you've been there through all stages of the business, I would say, in the very beginning, where you're really forced to be strategic around hiring and org charts and being lean to where you're at. How do you build a team? And I keep that broad because we talked about this all the time on calls. It's like you can go viral on TikTok and that's going to change your strategy here. You can have an incredible email list. Amazon could be your new driver business or this or this. There's so much variability. So, how do you hire and how did you all build the team that drove so much success across different platforms in those beginning stages?
That's a great question. So, Garden of Life is much older than my tenure at Garden of Life, but what I learned very quickly is they were very particular about the hiring process. It took forever. I was like, you guys, look at my resume and hire me, please. It was one, again, understanding who you are as a brand and a company and really sticking to that. And so we've gone through and we've spoken to really qualified on paper people who either didn't have the belief system or wouldn't be a fit, right? And so that was a big part of it. And so with us, we did a lot of interviewing. Obviously it would start with HR, but bringing in people who are even entry level and asking just like for a culture fit, making sure that values align. And then once the team comes in, really being supportive, really making sure that people can understand the business, bringing people in. Again, you mentioned removing ego. I was allowed into conversations that at other places that I never would have been privy to. And, same whether it was interns that came over or, entry level people, it was okay, here's where we are. Here's how your job matters. Here's how it's driving the business forward. And don't forget that you're a human being first. So I think those things, one, again, gave people passion for the business, but also made them want to make sure that their role within the team was useful and that they were bringing their best foot forward. So that really helped us, drive the business.
I love that because I honestly I think it reiterates to every other principle we've talked about here, and it is that connection and values. And everyone gets caught up with, I think, expertise in our space because, e-commerce is new and it is shiny. But if you lose sight of those core values of what you're trying to achieve culturally or the community you're building through commerce, then it doesn't matter. None of those skill sets matter if you lose sight of that connection.
Absolutely. Obviously there's so much expertise and I would never claim to have those. I'm not there. That's why I work with you guys, right? We
Well,
need that.
I would
But
argue that.
in commerce anyway, you guys are the experts there, but it's so interesting how quickly things can change, right? Consumers can be very fickle if you don't give them a reason to really connect with you.
People
I'm
get
seeing that
canceled fast.
and for nothing. Like I'm not going to say the name of the brand, but there is a brand that I use and I love and they're great. And I would say maybe 3 or 4 months ago, it was every third TikTok ad was for this brand. And now I'm seeing like a renaissance against this brand. And the worst part is consumers aren't given a reason, aren't saying a reason why they're just like, it's better. And because I'm a marketing person, right? So I'm digging deep and I'm trying to figure out what it is on TikTok that they're saying is better about this brand.
It's kinda like when everyone says they hate Nickelback, even though the number one karaoke song is always gonna be Rockstar. Do you actually hate Nickelback, or is it just cool to say you hate
It's
Nickelback?
cool to say it. Yeah. And let's go karaoke. You know?
That could be a whole nother conversation. How do you
Yeah.
establish a good QBR with karaoke?
Listen, you can find a good QBR in many places.
Being quick to change and quick reactive to the market is a must in the space. I think that's where we see a lot of brands failing. If you read any managerial book or like core business book, the first thing is like SOPs, SOPs, SOPs. Like make sure everything in your business can be repeated and you're not dependent on any one employee. The problem with that is our industry changes so quick that you really need to be first to market with things. You need to understand the arena you're playing in and be able to adapt quickly.
Absolutely. And you need to be able to let go of what you've learned, right? So I think the thing that I've been thinking about most recently, and I've seen it a little bit, in the conversation in the space, is marketers look different now, right? Creators are marketers. Any person can pick up a camera and a phone and go outside and become a brand. And so big brands, yes, you have more money and yes, you have more resources, more quote unquote experts, but start paying attention to what those people are doing. They have a very good understanding of the consumer in general and what they want and how to connect and how to talk to people. And if brands aren't careful, they're going to become dinosaurs. They're going to become the newspaper industry. And I'm not talking about Wordle, I'm talking about the actual like
Like
piece of paper.
an actual physical paper that's delivered to your
Yeah,
door.
yeah, I haven't seen one in a while, but I heard those. I watch all the news.
I couldn't agree more. It's exciting to be in our space because it changes so rapidly, and it's really cool to think about. My 18-year-old sister could pick up her phone, contact a manufacturer, and she's been telling me that she's gone viral on TikTok because she has one video that got 30,000 views. I'm
Fire
like,
her.
that's enough to build an audience on nowadays. If you find a way to truly connect with your audience that stands out and drives loyalty, you're gonna have a competitive advantage. You're gonna start making up share from these larger brands who are overgeneralizing their audience and they're not rapidly adapting to the changing market.
Absolutely. Connection is currency at this point. That is the thing that's going to keep you guys going.
If my editors are listening to that, that needs to be like connection is currency. I need that in a real format so we can go viral. We need t-shirts. We're selling merch for this. We're gonna take advantage of this opportunity.
Oh yeah, for sure. But it truly is true, but especially you brought up like brands getting canceled. That brand's not going to get canceled to the people that they have a connection with. And they might be quiet and just stay out of the, look at what's happening to poor Drake, poor Aubrey. He's going through it right now, but he's not going anywhere. You can just wait and come back. If you have a good, strong product and you understand who you are as a brand, there are the people who love you and you can come back in and really come back to it. Versus if you're just pushing out mass awareness and you're not really trying to connect to a consumer, what is going to stop them from, especially in a time right now when people are strapped for cash? What is the reason that they should not go switch to the cheaper alternative, the easier alternative, the quicker alternative?
100%. I don't want to get into a whole discussion around cancel culture because we've already joked about Nickelback, and I think that was enough for everyone. But I do think that connection drives accountability as well. I mean, I've seen it on my own, building a LinkedIn presence and building a company in public. It forces a level of authenticity and accountability. Because I know if I make a mistake or if a brand makes a mistake, you can connect with your audience and you can improve upon that. And I don't think we've had that historically. I mean, everyone's seen the headlines from one company or another. It's treating their employees like crap or they're not being candid around their product ingredients. Nowadays, that gets caught and that goes viral. And that's an opportunity to build a better connection if you're accountable and understanding. Or, like we mentioned, it's a good
Absolutely.
way
And I
to
think
fall
what,
off and start
that's
losing
can be
customers
very
fast because
daunting
you're
for
not truly
brands and
connecting with
especially
that
big
audience
brands. But
base.
I think the positive in that is that there is opportunity and there's a space and a platform to reconnect, right? You can make a mistake. And if you come back to consumers and you're giving them strong accountability, apology, change, consumers will forgive and they will come back. And, they will even, I've seen 1,000 times people come back and change their, first perspective. Like, okay, well, I thought this and da da da, and even stitch their own video and say, this is what I've learned so far. Consumers are willing to do that. And I think that's a great thing for brands where, before it was hope that your PR goes well and see what happens after. Now you can go out and really make a connection, instant results.
Yeah.
So
And I find that that drives more loyalty. I mean, in an industry of social and especially our generation, I think where we have seen all of it, the younger generation loves the connection. They love following the influencers that are most related to them, and they like the authenticity. They like people that make mistakes. You make a mistake, but then you own that mistake and come back. Those are the people that we've seen time and time again who have really succeeded.
Yeah. They want to see emotional intelligence from brands, right? They want to see that come back to them.
Well, we've chatted on a lot of things. Is there anything you're just incredibly excited about in the next few years in our space or that you want to chat about?
You know what I'm really excited about? As somebody who like can't draw a stick figure, I'm really excited about AI. Like there's a thousand things to learn. I'm still diving into it, but the possibilities with AI are just incredible, and especially when it comes to taking some of the things that are stuck in your head and bringing them to life with just words. I think that's beautiful, and I think that's we're going to see a lot more. Again, we talk about leveling the playing field. I think that's a great one, not just in marketing but across the board. Um, a lot more coming, a lot more creativity available through AI.
It's overwhelming in, like, the best way. You don't know what you don't know when it comes to AI. Like, there's so many things that, like, the other day, took a screenshot from Instagram, and I uploaded it into ChatGPT, and I was like, "Hey, can you scrape the titles of all these books from Instagram?" And it worked. And then I was like, "Wait, like, how much can I do with this?" I was like, "Can you rank every single book by the highest ratings on the internet and number of reviews?" And it did. It pulled a list, and I was like, "Who would have thought?"
I find that it's been forcing me to think a
Yeah.
little bit differently and think a little bit further. There's only so much you can do. You work a full time job. I'm a mom. My brain is just like enough
Yes.
at the end of the day. But then I get on ChatGPT, and the world is my oyster. It's amazing.
Vanessa, I've launched like 12 fake companies because of ChatGPT. Like, truly, I've launched a
No,
TikTok influencer account over wine at this point. Day and I got together. We created a company name, a logo, hashtags, and like 10 posts, all from ChatGPT. And then that's my problem being a visionary, right? I don't have enough integrators in my life to like, I just want to give people company ideas and like run with it. You do things with this. But it's insane how powerful it can be. And I think to your point, tying it back to the last discussion we had is creative has always been expensive. I mean, we all know the Super Bowl commercials that cost $7 million and what goes into creative. Performance marketing's always been easy. You drive a good ROAS, you get paid. Creative and brand marketing was different because it was so dependent on the subject. And now you take something like AI, which really is a huge unlock for brands, and all of these small side brands are now able to create graphics and imagery that aligns with their audience at the same pace and scale as the largest companies in the space.
exactly. And it can be in your major awareness drivers, or it can be in performance. There's just so much more possibility, and things are going to be a lot more interesting. And I think, again, I have a big passion for diversity and inclusion. I think that's a big opener, right, for people who don't have the resources but have a beautiful product, and maybe they don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the education or whatever it is. With AI, the possibilities are endless, and so I'm excited to see um, a lot more access come through AI.
Most definitely. I think to your example of diversity, it's you're able to take a look at your demographics and all of these core audiences and actually create a graphic that resonates with them. Historically, it was always, okay, what's the 80/20? What's the demographic that I can see most likely follows me? And let's only create advertising and marketing initiatives that focus on demographics. I can't afford to do anything else. Now you can take that and you can break it down and you can truly build connection with that core audience.
Absolutely. It's funny. This is such a silly example, but at Garden of Life, there's so many products. I mean, you guys, you ran our DSP and our search, so but there's so many products, but it's, we had to focus in on some. And I remember having a conversation about coconut oil, and there was it was all cooking, cooking, cooking. And I think about 7 years ago in the Black
Yep.
community, the whole thing was hair. And
Yep.
it was like, okay, but are we going to just put out an ad about putting it in your hair for this one specific demographic? Now you can.
Yes.
And you do it very effectively, create a great connection with these consumers in a meaningful way without having to prove to upper management why you need to spend an additional however many dollars to create this ad that's completely different from what you've done before.
That's such a great example because you think about that and like Just from a data analytics perspective, we have access to that information. Like on the Amazon space, you can clearly see what the search volume is behind something like coconut oil for hair. But the problem with scalability wasn't access to the data. You had the data. Building the creative specifically targeted for that audience, that took a lot of work because whether it's, hiring additional models, whether it's making adjustments here, now we can do that from desktop. We can get that turned around. And I think, a few companies that have done that well are Elf Cosmetics. I think they've done a great job of really connecting Liquid Death. They're selling water, and yet they're able to create graphics for every specific demographic. And that's going to be an unlock for the brands of the future.
Absolutely, for sure. If you want to talk about how to get a better test and learn strategy, there it is right there. You're saving so much money to be able to test this new audience with a very targeted ad, right? So I think that's an incredible unlock from AI.
And progress over perfection. Because I know that always comes up with AI. That's like the next thing I get is like, well, it's not that great. It's not as good as this. I'm like, that's not the point. Yeah, it's exactly one. Not yet. We know it's going to get there. I mean, have you seen like any of the images from like a year and a half ago with AI and it was like terrible with fingers? Like that was only like 12 months ago.
Listen, it couldn't as a black woman, it was like, why is my neck white? Like that was, 8 months ago. I refused. I was like, I cannot use an AI picture because I'm going to have a dark face and then I'm going to have a white neck and then I'm going to have 18 fingers. So I can't anymore. But now I actually look like myself and I'm like, this is incredible.
Also, realizing that the majority of consumers don't want perfection anymore. All of the authenticity and connection we've been discussing, that's what they're looking for.
I think that's one of the biggest learns we've seen with how quickly TikTok blew up in, around 2020 pandemic time, where it was people were just tired of perfect.
Yes.
They wanted to be a little bit imperfect. And
Well, when you're also stuck at home and not allowed to leave the house, it's kind of like we're embracing this. I miss the days of being able to drink wine at 10 a.m. and not have it.
That was fun. And everyone just sat in their pajamas on the calls and it didn't go outside for a week. No, I like going outside. I will say that. But having no rules was fun.
No, there were no rules. Nobody knew what was going to happen.
That was so fun.
Well, I think we've covered a lot, and I just want to give a huge thank you. I think this has been a fantastic episode, and just working with you in general, I think has been incredible because you always brought so much to the table. I walked away from every QBR feeling like I learned a ton, and I want to continue to have you on the podcast as well because I've learned so much just from this. So
I absolutely would love to come back. I think working with you guys has been so much fun, and the feeling is so mutual. I learned like I said, I was intimidated by you.
That's we all have that personality.
I really appreciate, embracing the questions and approaching them from a place of educating and support. And that helped me a lot to continue to ask questions because I think that's the thing that's helped me learn the most.
Of course. And now to this day, I think we've built an incredible community within the e-commerce space. I think we're all friends. And that's really nice to have because we all know it's not easy showing up with all the changes and everything that we discussed today. So thank you so much for hopping on. Can't wait to get this posted. Anyone who wants to contact either of us, we're going to be posting everything on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. We're both more than happy to build friendships and ask any questions that you may have.